You know, people always tell you that time heals everything, that the past softens, memories fade, and somehow the ache turns into wisdom. But here I am, 22 years later, still waking up with that same lump in my throat whenever I think about Mark's parents. It's not even hatred anymore. It's a scar that still burns when I remember how young and naive I was. I was 21 when I married Mark, too young to know that love isn't enough to survive everything. He was charming, soft-spoken, a little shy. His parents lived in another state, Ohio, and when he got a job offer there, we packed our bags and left California behind. I thought I was stepping into our future. Instead, I was walking into a cage built out of politeness, guilt, and silence. When we first arrived, his parents, Henry and Susan, greeted us like they were hosting royalty. But that sweetness didn't last long. Susan had this way of making you feel small without saying anything directly, like asking, "Oh, is that what your mother taught you to cook?" Or, "In this house, we do things a little more properly." I'd laugh it off, pretending not to notice the sting behind her words. Henry, on the other hand, was colder. He didn't believe in women working, said a real wife should take care of her husband and children. I wanted to find a job, learn the new city, maybe take classes. But every time I mentioned it, Mark would lower his voice and say, "Let's not upset Dad right now." So I stayed home. I smiled when Susan criticized how I folded the laundry. I apologized when Henry rolled his eyes at dinner. I swallowed my anger when Mark stayed silent through it all. But I was lonely. God, I was so lonely. I missed my mom. The smell of her coffee, the sound of her humming while she cleaned. I called her once every few weeks, but Susan always hovered nearby, sighing loudly, muttering something about long-distance bills. I felt like a teenager being monitored in her own marriage. Then came the baby. Eli was born in the middle of a blizzard. I thought maybe a new life would bring new warmth to the family. But instead, it gave them something else to control. Susan would take the baby from my arms, saying, "You rest, honey," but she'd never give him back until she was ready. She criticized the way I dressed him, how I held him, even how I sang to him. And Mark? He worked late, or said he did. He barely spoke when he got home. If I told him how bad things were, he'd just sigh. "They mean well," he'd say. "Don't take it so personally." But the night everything broke, I couldn't not take it personally. It was Eli's first birthday. We had a small dinner, cake, candles. Susan criticized everything: the frosting, the presents, the messy kitchen. I snapped. I told her I wasn't her maid, that she had no right to treat me like garbage in my own home. Henry slammed his hand on the table. He shouted that I was disrespectful and told me to get out. I thought he was bluffing, until he grabbed my suitcase from the hallway and tossed it on the porch. Mark stood there frozen. He didn't move. He didn't defend me. He just watched. I remember holding Eli close, the snow hitting my face like sharp little knives. My fingers were shaking, my teeth chattering, but I couldn't cry. Not then. I just kept walking down that street until my feet went numb. I stayed at a cheap motel that night, feeding my baby crackers and water, wondering how my life had turned into this. I thought about calling my mom, but I couldn't. I didn't want her to hear me broken. Mark showed up the next morning, begging me to come back. He said his dad didn't mean it, that things would be different. And somehow, like a fool, I believed him. But things were never different. Over the years, I built myself back up. I found a job, learned to drive, saved money. Eventually, we moved into our own apartment. Mark changed a little, Or maybe I did. I stopped expecting him to protect me. I stopped asking for love that came with conditions. Henry and Susan still live in that big gray house in Ohio. We visit sometimes, Christmas, birthdays, but only because Eli wants to see them. I smile, I say thank you, I bake cookies for the holidays. But inside, I'm somewhere else entirely, back in that snowy street, holding my baby and realizing I was completely alone. Sometimes people tell me I'm too cold now, too guarded. Maybe they're right, but they don't understand what it's like to survive years of quiet cruelty and still wake up every morning pretending everything's fine. The truth is, I don't hate them anymore. Not really. I hate the version of me that let them take my voice. I hate the silence I mistook for peace, and I hate that, after all these years, I still crave an apology that will never come. But most of all, I hate that I let them live rent-free in my heart for so long. Maybe forgiveness isn't about saying, "It's okay." Maybe it's just deciding you're done carrying their poison around. I'm still learning how to do that. Some mornings, I look in the mirror and whisper, "You made it." And for the first time in 20 years, I almost believe it.